Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jennifer Putulagiati and thank you for having me. In this video, I will tell you about humanitarian aid and disaster relief in the Russia and Ukraine war. But before that, I will tell you a little about the background of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Starting from the leader of Ukraine who is now closer to the West and wants to be part of NATO, making Putin as Russia's leader angry at the prospect of establishing a NATO base next to his border. In addition, a number of Eastern European countries have close relations with NATO, such as Poland and the Balkan countries. Russia began conducting large-scale military exercises as early as January 2022. All navies were deployed. This exercise is also carried out on land. Russia cooperates with Belarus, its close neighbor and ally, and shows Russia to NATO the need of going to attack at that time. However, Putin's country makes detailed security demands of the West. One of his points asks NATO to stop all military activities in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. Russia asked the alliance never to accept Ukraine or other ex-Soviet countries as members. Experts believe Putin did this for the purpose of forcing change in Ukraine. Russia wants Ukraine's leadership to be changed to pro-Moscow. On February 15, 2022, Putin made it clear that he would withdraw all troops from the border. Putin says Russia does not want war. According to him, Russia is ready to find a solution with the West through negotiations. Putin even declared Donetsk or DPR and Luhansk or LPR, two regions counter to the Ukrainian government, as independent countries. Under the pretext of keeping the peace, Putin signed a decree sending troops to Ukraine. But Western countries doubt this. Even NATO intelligence in Eastern Europe suggests Russia may still attack, albeit limitedly, using rebel territory in East Ukraine. And sure enough, the things that Putin had promised Ukraine did not materialize. Putin announced a military operation in Ukraine to defeat separatists in the east of the country. Explosions occurred in a number of cities in Ukraine, including Kiev. According to global macro researchers at Eurasia's group, Russia launched a major offensive across Ukraine and aimed to overthrow the Kiev government through military means. Russia has blatantly violated international law, undermined the principle of the international rules-based order, weakened the foundations of international cooperation, and Russia's violence threatened peace and stability on the European continent. Ukraine itself is a member of the United Nations, which means an independent and sovereign country. With the death toll rate rising, there is so much fear, sadness, and terror in every corner of Ukraine. The U.S. Agency of International Development has deployed a disaster relief response team to respond to the growing humanitarian needs of Ukraine. The Director General of the United Nations International Office for Migration, Antonio Vitorino, said the conflict in Ukraine has displaced more than 1.4 million people who now depend on aid to meet their daily needs. The United Nations views humanitarian corridors as one of a number of possibilities to temporarily halt armed conflict, usually limited in certain locations and certain tempo as well. The demilitarized zone was agreed upon by the two warring parties. Humanitarian corridors can be used to supply food, medicine, medical aid, or also to evacuate civilians from fighting areas. Many parties expressed deep concern over the potential impact of the conflict on food access for civilians in conflict areas. United Nations Humanitarian Chief Martin Griffiths has allocated 20 million US dollars drawn from the UN Central Emergency Response Fund to support emergency operations along contact lines in eastern Donetsk and Luhansk. The funds are also used to provide healthcare, shelter, food, water, and sanitation to the people most vulnerable to the effect of conflict. Peace efforts have failed, but diplomatic efforts to find a solution are still ongoing. Ukraine hopes that the European Union and NATO countries are willing to help them confront Russia. Indonesia, which is currently the chair of the G20 forum, was asked to take a stand on the conflict. A number of people expect Indonesia to play an active role in reducing conflict through the forum so that it does not spread and have an impact on other countries. Indonesia's humanitarian contribution at this difficult time in Ukraine history has also become a friendly relationship between the two countries. Even though Ukraine and Indonesia are geographically far apart, both countries have the same will to live in a role based on the laws of a democratic society. Indonesia and Ukraine both have a history of struggle for sovereignty. Other countries also took part in providing various aids. For example, France has sent 33 tons of aid to the Ukrainian citizens who took refuge in Poland. Another 33 tons went to Moldova. Israel sent 100 tons of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Ireland contributed 10 million euros in aid to refugees, as well as medical supplies. Turkey's disaster relief agency sent 3 aid trucks to Moldova for Ukrainian refugees in the country. The Turkish Red Cross has also sent aid to Ukrainians who fled to Romania. Austria plans to provide 15 million euros for humanitarian aid distributed through international NGOs in Ukraine. That's all I can say about humanitarian aid and disaster relief in the Russia and Ukraine war. Hopefully we as social beings can uphold human rights and peace for the sake of mutual prosperity. Thank you for the attention. Have a good day.